The state of Illinois seems to be the epicenter of labor issues, especially when it comes to public sector labor issues. Good morning, Springfield's Morning News. I'm Greg Bishop, and we've got a ton to tackle here with this new book that I received in the mail. It's called Not Accountable. It's by Phillip K. Howard. He's a New York Times bestseller. And some of his bio here is he's a lawyer, an author, and civic leader. He's the chair of Common Good, a nonpartisan organization aimed at simplifying government. He grew up in Kentucky and lives in New York City, and he joins us now on WMAY to talk about his book. And I say that Illinois is the epicenter of labor issues, especially modern labor issues, Phillip, because we had, of course, the Janus v. AFSCME case that had a state employee say they didn't want to pay public union dues in order to keep their job. That went all the way to the Illinois Supreme Court, where they decided on that. I believe it was 2019 when that decision dropped. But that ultimately changed the landscape and said that people shouldn't be forced to pay union dues for a union they don't agree with politically. But then, here we are just months away from when the Illinois electorate approved a constitutional amendment to the Illinois Constitution that codifies collective bargaining rights in the state constitution, which a lot of people argued is really going to lead to higher taxes on local municipalities because they have to ultimately give in to these labor agreements and the collective bargaining issues, let alone the questions of, is this going to lead to the possibility of public safety strikes or giving more power to school teachers in Chicago, for instance, where you've had all of this. So I appreciate you taking the time with us. Tell us about the book and the impetus of writing the book. Good morning.
Right. Good morning, Greg. Well, the book argues that that the public union control, some of which you just mentioned, have undermined democratic governance. Voters elect mayors and who don't have the authority to get the teachers back to work in Chicago during COVID. They can't controls over police forces. You can't even reassign a cop under the collective bargaining agreements. So basically, voters elect officials who are largely figureheads. They have no control over the operating machinery of government because the collective bargaining agreements effectively give unions a veto. And I argue in the book that that's unconstitutional under the federal Constitution, and that the collective bargaining rights that were granted to public unions really only in 1983. That was when Illinois allowed it. I mean, it's just 40 years old. And the recent constitutional amendment in Illinois, I think, is clearly unconstitutional. The voters don't have the right to give powers to a favored class under the federal Constitution. There's something called a guarantee clause that basically says you have to maintain a Republican form of government. And what that means, and James Madison talked about a lot, is that voters elect officials who have authority to actually run government. And under these collective bargaining agreements and other union controls, the mayors and governor that voters elect don't have that authority.
So, distill that down a bit more here, because you had a governor, J.B. Pritzker, who advocated for this collective bargaining enshrinement in the Illinois Constitution, essentially saying that he wants to make sure that workers have certain rights, right? I mean, that's what they were ultimately laying out there. But what does this mean for another governor that may get into the office in 4 years from now? Are their hands tied when it comes to being able to negotiate on behalf of the taxpayers that foot the bill here? Sure.
They have no authority whatsoever, and J.B. Pritzker had no authority to give it away if he wanted to give it away. And everybody knows what's going on, which is it's a political payoff. One of the things about public unions that people don't understand is they're completely different than trade union negotiating, so like car workers and the like, because there the workers have a vested interest in the ongoing viability and efficiency of the enterprise. Otherwise, they lose their job. The company goes out of business, or it moves overseas, or the like. Government can't move anywhere, so the unions have government over a barrel, and then even worse, the negotiating is collusive. The unions help J.B. Pritzker get elected, and then they come in and sit on this side of the bargaining table and say, now what are you going to give me? It's not bargaining, it's a payoff. So it's just become an incredibly corrupt, with a small c, kind of arrangement where the unions are so powerful. I mean, how many public employees are there in the state of Illinois? They're by far the largest interest group, and they're organized through collective bargaining, and they collect hundreds of millions of dollars a year, almost all of which is used for political activity. And the losers here are the Illinois taxpayers. I mean, Illinois is functionally insolvent. It really is ground zero, as you pointed out.
We're talking with Phillip Howard. He is the author of the new book, Not Accountable, Rethinking the Constitutionality of Public Employee Unions. I want to touch on the forward here from former Governor Mitch Daniels of Indiana. But talk about, I guess, what moving forward here. Sure, you set up the argument that public sector employee unions aren't constitutional, but what's next? How do you fix that problem?
Well, you can't fix it politically for the reasons that Illinois can't fix it politically. So there needs to be a lawsuit brought in federal court arguing that these controls in Illinois are unconstitutional because they've effectively removed the powers of voters to elect people. I mean, all democracy is a process of accountability. You elect people, they don't do a good job, you elect someone else. So they've taken away all accountability in public service. Nobody gets fired, right? It's legally impossible. So democracy can't work. So we need to bring a lawsuit. I'm talking to some public interest litigation shops in Chicago in a week or so, flying out. There's a really great interview on C-SPAN that your listeners can look at with the head of C-SPAN yesterday. This is a problem hiding in plain sight. I mean, the emperor has no clothes here. The public unions have simply amassed too much power. It's funny, they've amassed the power of government in the form of all the work, public employees, against the reform of government.
Phillip K. Howard, the book, Not Accountable, Rethinking the Constitutionality of Public Employee Unions. Tell us about how you got Mitch Daniels, the former governor of Indiana, to talk about this particular issue with a foreword he penned for your book.
Well, I've been involved in trying to sort of clean out government bureaucracies for almost 25 years now. I've advised every president since Clinton and Gore. I worked closely with Gore in reinventing government. And one of the officials that I worked with over the years was Mitch Daniels when he was governor of Indiana, and he was a wonderful governor, and then a fantastic president of Purdue University. So he and I stayed in touch about trying to think about how do we create an affirmative vision in which government can actually be effective without burning taxpayer money. And the more I thought about it, the more I thought that the cornerstone of any argument has to be an effective public service where people feel pride and work hard and feel an obligation to work hard. And that's not the public service we have, because it's very discouraging to work in a place where nobody's accountable and performance doesn't matter. So Mitch and I were talking about it, and he agreed to write this introduction.
So again, the book is Not Accountable, Rethinking the Constitutionality of Public Employee Unions. Phillip K. Howard is the author. So you're essentially, you said earlier, somebody needs to sue over the state's Workers' Rights Amendment, as the advocates called it. Others said it's just going to take away power from elected officials to be able to negotiate crucial aspects of collective bargaining contracts. But you suggested that there needs to be a lawsuit. Are you somebody that's going to maybe help bring forward such a lawsuit in the state of Illinois?
Yes. I'm talking to lawyers in Illinois. I'm flying out in a week or so, and to begin planning, such a lawsuit. The Janus lawsuit, which ended up in the Supreme Court, in the United States Supreme Court, was just such a thing where the workers who didn't want to belong to unions were nonetheless forced to pay agency fees, and the Supreme Court held that was unconstitutional. And in that opinion, the Supreme Court went out of its way to not only talk about the First Amendment issues raised by Janus, but also how the public unions have made the public sector unmanageable. I mean, just think about it. How much waste is there when public supervisors, not just the elected officials, but the people running a department don't have the authority to manage it? Just think about how much waste there is. Are they wasting half the money, 2/3 of the money? You just simply can't get anything done without having a hub on the wheel that's deciding how to best to deploy the resources. Well, that's, welcome to Illinois government.
Well, and then you had during COVID, and you mentioned it earlier about teachers unions saying they couldn't open the schools for certain reasons, and really tying the hands of not just the school administrators but even the parents needing to get their kids educated.
It means truly, truly tragic. I mean, the teachers didn't go back to work for 2 years in Chicago. The nurses were working in the hospitals. Grocery clerks were working. Other people whom the public needed were doing their jobs, but the teachers refused. And there have been studies that show that particularly underprivileged youth learning plummeted. It plummeted so far compared to the period before COVID that experts don't think that these children will ever be able to recover. So the lives of tens of thousands of young people have been affected by the fact that the teachers union, in their contract, felt they had the right to refuse to go back to work. And I don't know what happened in Illinois, but in other states, they also refused to do distance learning because the contract didn't require it.
So do you see that a situation like that, maybe not another pandemic, but something maybe similar, just like an influenza outbreak, do you think that could lead to a similar type of action now that Illinois has this labor amendment in the state constitution?
Oh, yes. I mean, there's just it's the hands of public supervisors have been cut off. The people in charge, the inmates are in charge of the prison. So yes, I mean, it's really tragic. And, the unions they keep talking about the rights of the workers. And all this goes up. What about the rights of the public and the rights of the students in the schools and the rights of the citizens to have a police force that's trustworthy? What about the rights? The rights of taxpayers not to have their money effectively burned in inefficient work rules that, filled with feather bedding requirements and such, rigid job categories. I mean, it's a scandal.
Phillip,
And everybody knows
I'm going to have to stay in touch with you because outside of the morning show, I also cover the State House for the Center Square and Illinois Radio Network, and I want to talk with you while you're in the Chicago area or afterwards and track any kind of litigation you may bring. But, of course, the book is out now. It's Not Accountable. Phillip K. Howard, you can see here, and you can order this. It is available, and I imagined it's available at your website. Phillip, tell us where people can get this.
Sure. Well, any Amazon, any bookstore, it's widely available, and it's very short. It's 160 pages, so it makes the argument. I've tried to be crisp and to the point, and I think, I think it's irrefutable. People know people know this emperor has no clothes. So it's time to do something about it.
Again, greatly appreciate the time. Not Accountable, Rethinking the Constitutionality of Public Employee Unions. Phillip K. Howard. Stand by just one moment. I want to chat with you briefly off air here. But it is now 7:25 on WMAY. And let's take a break, and we'll be back with more coming